Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
What is up, girls? And welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today's episode is going to be an absolute firecracker because I've got the absolute pleasure of having Emily from King Bodies with me today. And for those who are not familiar with who Emily is, make sure you go to her Instagram, check her all about. But pretty much she is an online-based coach who's also a WBFF champion and recently a mum to a beautiful little girl named Luna, which we actually were just talking about before I started even recording, just admiring how sweet she is. So Emily, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you so much for having me on board.
So good to have you. How has everything been going on for you since you've become a mum?
Look, it's a lot, and it's like a daily progression of everything. Like, I don't think ever you're on top of it or you know what's going on. I think other people will relate to that. You think that you have things sorted for the moment, and then things change. But all in all, it's been fantastic, and I wouldn't obviously change it for the world. And but it's a huge transition, like a huge one.
What are some of the transitions that you found that have been quite challenging for you?
I think at first, especially just through the pregnancy stage, it was initially like the physical thing, which I guess a lot of people are really first worried about. Like they're worried about getting weight, they're worried about what their body's going to look like and feel like. And that was a huge thing, especially in that first trimester where things are kind of really new and you're not necessarily showing, but you're still very pregnant. Mm-hmm. And those initial changes were the hardest. When it got to like the second and third, I think I came into my own with understanding, like, it was a whole mindset shift after that first trimester. It was like, hey, this is what we're doing now. This is my new norm, and I'm not going to feel great. And that's also so okay. I think there's a lot of people that don't talk about how hard it is mentally during that stage, and sometimes it can feel really isolating because you're like, I don't want to complain because this is beautiful, but also I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling with this transition, and I'm really struggling with my body. But then once you say it out loud, like, I hate my body, everyone's like, whoa, that's so mean of you, like, don't say that. And you're like, but I'm feeling it, like, let me just vent that. So it was really important during that time to have people around me that were not going to shut me down or make me feel like that wasn't appropriate to say, because I think sometimes you just need to get those types of feelings out. Otherwise you do feel really isolated and you feel awful for thinking negative things about your body, when in fact everyone, I think, feels that way or thinks that way at some stage.
100%. Yeah, like we all go through certain life stages that we just don't like the way we're looking or the way we're feeling. And I truly believe that what you've just said, I can relate to it, even though I don't have kids, but like there's been certain stages that I felt really insecure within my body, and I found that I couldn't express it because people will be like, oh, like, just be grateful, like very like toxic positivity. Yeah. So like, I have so much compassion for you right now, actually opening up about this, because this is the reality of being a woman. We change through life, from like teenagers to being like in our 20s to 30s, 40s, being moms, being older, like hormones, like, oh my God, like so much shit is going on within our bodies. So for us to not express it can also make things worse for us mentally.
Yes, 100%. Because then you bottle it all up and you're like, am I a bad person for feeling this way? But in fact, like you said, we have so many phases of life, and this is just one phase. So the mindset shift was going, this is where I'm at right now, and this is like, it's okay to feel not fantastic all the time. But I became so much more grateful at that point in time, because I was like, hey, I'm just accepting who I am right now, instead of looking back or comparing myself to other people. Because like, again, it's like when you're going to do a competition prep, it's the same, like comparing yourself against other people. I was always like, why am I not like an egg on legs like that chick? Like, why can't I just look like I have tiny little legs and a big belly? Like I was a big pregnant woman, because I'm already quite muscular plus a belly. So and I'm short, so there wasn't much room for things to like, stretch out. But at the end, I look back now and I'm like, I do miss my belly, and I never thought I would say that ever, because and I don't think anyone would think that I would say that, but I do. Like, it was such a cool journey, and I was so curious the whole time about like what we were actually capable of. And I think like women really undersell themselves, because we do incredible things with our bodies throughout our life, and we never give ourselves credit for that. So, especially coming into birth and postpartum, I was like, God damn, I am like superhuman right now. And how do other women not feel like this, And it's sad, because a lot of them do get to like that postpartum and they're like, I just want my body back. I feel disgusting and I hate myself. And I'm like, whoa, like we went from baking life to giving birth, and now you hate yourself. Like, it sucks, and it's years the reality, but then it's good to have that little bit of a like, I did a pretty cool thing also.
Yeah, I truly agree with that. We need to give ourselves a little bit more credit sometimes. And you made a really good point about comparing ourselves to others. Like when I used to compete, I would compare myself to others. But now when I'm like owning my own business, I'll compare myself to other business owners.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. And like as we evolve, we notice that our lives are completely different to someone else. Like you said, you're shorter, you're muscular.
Yeah.
Your tendency of holding Luna was completely different to, let's say, Karen next door, who is like probably 6 foot and like a twig. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how we're always trying to find what else, we can do around that to actually make ourselves feel a little bit better. But inside, it's just making us feel worse.
Yeah. Comparison is like, and the thing is like a lot of things these days, it's like, don't compare yourself and don't do this and don't. But subconsciously, we're always going to. And I think it's about finding like more of a positive thing. Like, I used to be quite negative, especially like another thing during pregnancy was watching my business go a completely different direction, when at the time I was like, oh no, like what am I gonna fail, because I'm going from comp prep, gen pop to a lot of pregnancy and postpartum. But at that stage, a lot of the pregnant postpartum people weren't coming on board, so I was just losing clients at one stage, because they were like, well, you're not a competitor anymore. And I'm like, yes, I am. But I was comparing my business at that point to people that were single, mid-20s, were competing and prepping and shredded and stuff. And I was like losing my brain. And I was like, I had to stop at that point and check myself and be like, we're on completely different life phases. And whoever's going to follow me this way, that's great. I'm grateful for them. And whoever I'm going to lose on the way, I'm glad that they were there at the start. But, this is my direction now. So letting go of that side of my life was really important, to be like, I'm no longer that person, and I'm a completely different person with a completely different following now. And it's true, like my whole following has just changed dramatically in the last 12 months.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, because like you mentioned before, we go through different phases in life. You're not always like, yes, you're known right now as a bodybuilder, as a champion, but you're not going to carry it till like the rest of your life. That was like a big stage of your life back then, where now you're like, cool, I'm still a coach, I'm still a business owner, but I'm a mum now. So with that transition, I do feel that the right clientele will definitely be attracted to what you're doing right now. And it's so relatable, because we hold on to stuff that we've done in the past. And ourselves, oh, I'm still a competitor, or I'm still a gymnast, or I'm still, I don't know. For some reason, I have like a keto dieter in my head. Don't know why that's in my head. But like in relation to that, we keep on holding on to stuff that, we did in the past, and we're scared of letting it go, like you mentioned, to actually move forward into a different direction.
Yeah, when in fact, like, just owning what you are now it has so much power, instead of still holding on and identifying as that person. Because if I kept identifying as like the competitor, bodybuilder, athlete, which I still am in some respects, but like that carries with a whole different way of holding myself and my actions. Like that would mean that I would still, feel like I need to go to the gym 6 days a week and thrash myself and, be dieting right now and things like that. And that's just not what is actually going to be good in my life right now. And that's a big thing as well, like was letting go of that identity and moving into a different identity. Yeah.
Huge topic to chat about, because a lot of clients that I've had who are pregnant or have been pregnant, well, postpartum, they try and get their body back prior to pregnancy. And I know you're really big on talking about this. I'm pretty sure you did a post about this not long ago, saying how your goal wasn't to get back to what you were like before you had Luna. It was to get back to a place that you're loving yourself, you're feeling healthy, you're feeling fitter. And I think that's such an important topic for people to understand.
Yeah. So like, and originally, like when I was pregnant, or even before that, like when I was thinking about having kids and stuff like that, I was like, oh, after I get pregnant and in my postpartum phase, I'm going to get shredded and I'm going to show people, what they can do and, what people are capable. And now I realize like how stupid that sounds and how like not compassionate to the body that sounds. Because it's like, it's a thought process of like a younger me and me going like, I'm going to look like I've never had a kid before. But then I got here and I'm like, but I want to spend time with Luna. Like I want to honor my body through good nutrition, and I want to honor my body through movement, but I don't want to thrash it and, be hating myself, because there's a difference between, doing things because you love yourself and doing things because you hate yourself. And a lot of women in this postpartum phase do things because they hate themselves.
Yes.
And it's coming from such a toxic place, and it never ends up well because it's always so extreme, so that's why like my journey into this was really showing people that we can achieve something fantastic through compassion for our bodies and through nourishing our bodies, and not going into a dieting phase straight away and not going back into 6 days of training. Like I maintain what I have now on like 3-4 days a week training, and that's split between all different types of training. It doesn't necessarily just have to be the gym. Like I do a neighborhood class, which is like a HIIT training class. I do running and I do like weight training. So like it's just movement. And that's such a far cry from where I was. Like you need to do 6 days of training to achieve anything. And you need to be doing this and you need to be doing that. And in normal life without children, that's fantastic. And there is a time and a place to be strict and hard on yourself. But in a postpartum phase, it's not the time to be that at all, because then you end up going, why is this baby crying at nighttime? I need to get up in the morning to train, or like, I don't have time to prep my food and I'm going to fail and I'm going to feel like shit. So like if having that compassion of going, like I get up in the morning and sometimes I have slept 4 hours and I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to train today. And that's okay, and that's fine. I'll go for a walk or a swim, or I'll just sleep, whatever. Like that's what I want people to look at more in this phase, instead of being like, this is what I need to do to achieve this result. It's like, no, that doesn't work for everyone. We all need different approaches, especially if we haven't slept, especially if the baby's teething, especially if, you don't have help from family like that. There's a lot of things to consider.
So many things to consider. And I love that you mentioned about not jumping straight back into dieting, because so many times I get inquiries and they're like, I had a baby about 2 months ago, I'm ready to diet. It's just like, whoa, like hold your horses, woman. Like you literally just brought a human into life. Your body needs some resting. Like you can't just jump straight back into dieting. And I love the fact that you mentioned that we need to be more compassionate and more nourishing towards our body, because birth is a beautiful thing for some women. Again, like some women experience it different, but in terms of like our physiology as a woman, giving birth is quite traumatic.
Yeah.
It's a big fucking process, not just physically but mentally. And in terms of like the birth, around that birth period, how was that for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Like as in like how was my birth, or how was like
your birth, your physical, like what was it on you physically, mentally?
So like the pre-birth, I actually went over 41 weeks, and that was awful. I never thought like that I would be like so keen to get this child out of me at that stage, but I was like, it was hot. I was like swollen. I was tired. I was expecting her to come early, and that was my mistake, because then you're like, every day after that, you're like, oh, today? And you're like, no. And I'll say, so I waited. We waited for like 3 weeks, and then I was like, okay, we're just going to go back to doing. I went back to work in my 41st week because I was like, I just need to do something. Like, it was driving me insane. So, so then she came like out of the blue on like the 41st weekend of the week, like the 7th day. So she waited a really long time. And like at that point, they're like, do you want to induce and do you want to do this? And I was like, I just want to hold off. I just want to hold off, and I just want to, see what happens. And they were like, well, the risks of this and this go up. And so it was a really scary time for me. Like there was so much like fear mongering around that stage. And I understand totally that all these fears were like, all their concerns were really valid, because what they're seeing is data, and then they're just telling me what they're seeing. So I understood that it wasn't them trying to tell me what to do. And I got like 3 stretch and sweeps, did nothing. And then I was like, she's just going to come when she's ready. She's obviously just chilling in there. And she looked like a big baby, and she ended up being like 3.7 kilos. So she was a pretty big baby. But it was like a 12-hour posterior birth, which was awful, because the whole time I was just like, this can't fit. This doesn't feel right. Like this doesn't feel the way that birth should feel. This is way too painful. And I have a really high pain threshold. And I was like, is there meant to be a lull between contractions? And they're like, yeah, you're meant to have like a rest. And I was like, well, there's not. Like it was just, there's not. And it's like wrong. So I spent like, 6 hours in the shower, 6 hours, like just walking around, like holding onto the bed. It was the most painful thing that I've ever done in my life. And like, granted, it's not meant to be that painful. When they're the right way, like it's meant to be not so painful, but it was just so bad. And I was like, this baby has to come out at some stage. So then I opted for an epidural at that stage, because I had no energy. It was like running a marathon but not having a rest. And I was just like, can someone tell me where the end is? Because I need to know. And at one stage it was like, yeah, you're like, I think it was like, you're 7 centimeters dilated. Then like, oh, now you're 4. And I was like, how can we go backwards? Like this is, and in my head I'm like, this is not the way. And then like, we always think things are going to turn out perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very open to things not turning out perfectly, but also it's just a big hit when things don't. And I was like, oh no, like, where is this going to head? Am I going to have a cesarean section, which is not the worst thing ever, but it was something that I personally didn't want to do. And we got to the 12-hour mark. I was like, I just need an epidural. They put the epidural in. I'm a nurse from way back, and I was like, and I knew what an epidural is. But when you're in that birth brain and they don't tell you that, like, they didn't brief me on what was going to happen to my body, and I couldn't move my legs. Obviously, that's a part of an epidural, but I didn't know that at the time. And I stopped, my legs stopped moving, and I was like, holy shit, like this has got really scary really fast. And then they cut it too high, so I couldn't actually move most of my arms.
Oh, wow.
And then I started coughing really slow, and I was like, this is not normal. Like I couldn't clear my airway properly. And I was like, you got to take this out. So I ended up getting taken out, getting it like ceased. And then slowly movement started coming back. But that was probably like the scariest, hour of my life when it started. Cause I was like, oh no, I have to have a cesarean now. I can't do anything. Like I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't cough. Like I was getting dizzy, and they were asking me if I was getting dizzy. And I was like, like I was lying to them because I didn't want them to make me have a cesarean. Yeah. So I was like, nah, I can push through. I was like, the power of the mind, I can push through. And like after it, I was like, yeah, I was really dizzy and I couldn't really see too well. And they're like, what the hell? I'm like, I lied to you. I'm sorry. That was like the last thing I wanted. I just didn't want to get a cesarean. I wanted to birth her naturally. And at the end, I actually ended up birthing her naturally, and I was able to move on to my all fours, which is like the position that I wanted to birth in, because I didn't want to birth laying on my back.
Wow, that's so cool. So how was that transition? Because it's so common, you see, women on, movies and TVs and documentaries, and they're all just giving birth on their back. So
because it's fighting gravity, they're not actually meant to come out that way. The baby ends up going like this. So it's meant to just be like out.
Yeah, like mammals.
like mammals. So, and it's like a lot of women actually birth on all fours or leaning on something or leaning over something. So yeah, it is strange when you see all the is birthing on their back.
Yeah.
And in an epidural position, that's pretty much the only one that you can do. There is some like research coming out now that they can move you around, but you can't feel your legs, so you can't stand on your legs. Like you have no legs. But she was actually born. It was such a traumatic birth for her that she ended up having meconium aspiration. So that's when they breathe in like poo particles, essentially. Like they go to the toilet in their little sack and then they breathe it in on the way out. So it was awful. It was like an hour of being able to hold her and feed her, and we realized quite like straight away that something was really quite wrong. Her breathing was labored and she was a little bit like purple for too long, and they're meant to be purple, but I went for a shower and came out and there was like they rushed her to NICU and she spent 2 weeks on a breathing machine and sedation for this aspiration, which happens to, it's not very common, but it does happen after 41 weeks, and it can happen after quite a traumatic birth. So it didn't end up the way that I wanted, but me and Matt both went into like how can we see this in a better way, because if we got negative about it, it would have gone a totally different way. So it was the hardest 2 weeks of my life, and not the way that like a new mum should ever start like their life with a bub, but it was the way that we started, and we got through it. And my nursing background really didn't help because I could see how sick she was. But yeah, like everyone was amazing. The doctors were amazing. The nurses were amazing, and I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. But
I can imagine. I wouldn't have slept either.
That was the start of my postpartum. So like a lot of people give birth and it's nice sometimes. Or like they give birth, they stay in hospital, they recover a little bit, then they go home. I gave birth, I didn't sleep. I was traumatized from seeing my daughter so sick. And then I came home and my nervous system was like shot. I remember just like shaking constantly for like weeks on end. And it was a lot of like, I didn't want to take her outside because what if she got sick? I didn't want to show her to people because what if she got sick from them? And so it was a big time, and it took a lot of strength to get through that. And like now you wouldn't even think that she was sick. Like she's the most chunkiest, healthiest, loudest little child. So, and that was all on her that she got through that though. But yeah, no, like that birth, it was a big deal. So coming into like having a baby next time, I'm like, I do really need to decompress that so that I don't come into that with the same fears that I, still have for childbirth again.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Like, it's just so fascinating to hear these stories because everyone has a different story of how they give birth, how they perceive the birth. And you know what? Like, from what you've been through, like, it's no wonder that before you have your next child, it's just like, all right, what do I need to work on my mindset to be better and more prepared? But you also mentioned that you had a certain, like, you didn't have certain expectations, but in the back of our mind, like in the subconscious mind, we're always thinking of what it would look like because of the movies that we see, of the stories that people tell us. So it's like, oh, one day you have this perception, cool, I'm going to give birth, it's going to be fine, they're going to drug me, she's literally just going to shoot out of my vagina and like, that's it, it's going to be perfect. But then shit hits the fan, literally hits the fan, and you're like, holy shit, like, what do I do? So again, like, it takes a lot of bravery, and like, from what I'm understanding, like, you and Matt obviously worked really great together as a team, and he was just like, cool, what can we do right now to just make things a little bit better instead of, going into that negative mindset?
And it was more so about like looking after each other and just making sure that because we couldn't do anything to help her at that stage. So it was like, how are we gonna look at this? And like every day we would find something like little to be grateful for, like, today her blood pressure went up a little bit, or today her blood pressure medication went off, or today she's not on so much morphine. So it was like tiny little things, and that would seem like nothing, but we're like, if we can't find those silver linings, like we're going to fall to pieces right now. So
Yes. Yeah.
little things at a time. So yeah, it was a big time, but it also showed us like, I remember saying to Matt, I'm like, I will never complain about her keeping me up at night, or I'll never complain about, you know, our perspective on, you know, what was going to be challenging changed like so much. I remember I was like, I don't know about getting her, you know, giving her that Hep B vaccination, whatever, like that, when they first get like born, like those vaccinations and stuff. I was like, I don't know about that, you know, like I don't know about that at all. And now I'm like, she got everything. Like she'd be fine. Like, like the perception of everything changed. And my sister gave birth 8 weeks later, and she was at the birth, which was obviously very traumatic for her because she was like, oh God, this is what I'm going to deal with. But she was like, oh, I don't know about like, you know, the vitamin K that they give them after. And I was like, my daughter just had, I was pumped through of like morphine and antibiotics and this. And I'm like she'd be fine. Like, as long as she's a well baby, like,
Yeah.
I'm grateful, you know, like I'm so grateful. Like, even if we have a bad night, I'm like, she's here because she could have easily not been here. So it's those little things that I'm just so grateful for.
Yeah, I love everything about that. And you know what? Like that's the beauty of being a mother, you know, from the stories that I've heard and from what you're saying right now. Like, yes, there's going to be nights that you're going to have to wake up and stay up for 2 hours for feeding, or while they're crying, or, you know, doing those little things. But, you know, pre-birth, you weren't expecting all of this. But now that it's happening, it's just like, oh my God, like I'm actually taking care of a human being who's like part of me. And you just like sit there and you're like, holy shit, like I created this. Like,
mind blowing.
yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so cool. And, you know, going back to giving ourselves a little bit more credit, it's like when, you know, you become a mom and when others become mothers, you know, we need to give ourselves a little bit more credit of like the wonderful creation that that we've made.
Exactly. So true.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. It's so freaking fascinating, and I'm pretty sure most of our listeners are going to be like, "Oh my God, I relate to this," or they'll be like, "Oh my God, like you can't go into pregnancy with like certain expectations because you literally don't know what's going to happen."
Yeah, drop, like, that was like when I now have like pregnant women or postpartum, like, drop any expectation that you have, because like you don't know what's going to happen on a daily basis. You don't want to go, it's like you don't know how your night's going to be. You don't know how your pregnant's going to you know, progress. And you know, it's the beauty of it, and it's also so scary and overwhelming for a lot of people. But once we drop that and we just go with the flow, like, it's so much easier. Like, I'm so much more of a relaxed human being these days than I have ever been, because like there's no point in resisting, you know, this thing that is pregnancy and postpartum. You may as well just roll with it and roll with your kid, because then you end up being resentful of them because, you know, they didn't have a good night. And, you know, they're not meant to have a good night. Like, they're babies and stuff. Like, they're going to have awful nights, and that's fine.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And like having the resistance is not just like around, you know, having babies and being pregnant, but like all aspects of our life.
Yeah.
It's really important for everyone to understand that the more resistance you have, as you said, like the more resentment you're gonna hold. And like what a shit way to live your life, you know?
Exactly. And like, like you said, outside of pregnancy and postpartum, like, no one knows how their day is going to go. So why not, like, you know, make the best of what day they have and the situation that they have, instead of expecting like X, Y, and Z. Like, especially with like clients and coaches, like, you know, don't expect to get to gym 6 days a week and nail your macros and be home and do all this like into the T. Like, always have a plan B and be okay with that as well. Like, if, you know, if this happens midweek, I'll just do this. And if this happens today, I'll just do this. Like, it's such a nicer way of living, instead of being like, if this doesn't happen, I'm a failure. If this doesn't happen, it's not perfect, therefore I suck, you know? So, you know, I feel like that's a better way of looking things.
Totally. Letting go of that all or nothing mindset.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit before about nutrition around postpartum. How's that been going on for you right now? Like, are you, like, what does nutrition look like for you at the moment?
So I was like adamantly tracking like first and second trimester, although I have a more relaxed way of looking at tracking, because in the end, like, I compete at a really high level over and over again. So I have periods of time when I'm super strict and I need to be, and that's the focus. Outside of that, I look at meeting calories, I look at protein, I look at food quality. I don't look at carbohydrates and fats too much, although I do lean always towards carbohydrates. And I'm mindful of it, but I'm not going to be like, oh no, I was like down 10 grams of fat today and up, this of this. Like, that's not the way that I want to live. And I know that some people do, and that's fantastic. Whatever, like different strokes and different folks. But in my last trimester of pregnancy, I went back to intuitively eating, which is something that I really struggled with for such a long time because of past eating disorders and things like that. But I actually just came into it and I was so happy doing it. Like I felt empowered in the fact that I didn't need to track and that I was making good decisions. I was using just a general guide of like 3 main meals a day, protein in each, good quality, like just good, the best quality food that I could have. And then like on the weekends, if I wanted to have, pizza or chocolate or chips, that's fine. But I was never restricted. Therefore, I never craved it. But also in the last trimester of pregnancy, I was not hungry at all. I was so nervous and anxious. So if anything, I was probably eating less. But I was also being mindful to make sure I was eating enough for myself. In postpartum, it led on to the same thing. So I got a meal prep company, which is like the golden month. And it's a specific postpartum meal prep company. And they delivered the meals every Monday. I had them for the week. It was like the easiest thing. And the thing that I suggest to so many people, if you can't get them made, get people to make them for you, because in that early stage of postpartum, a lot of people will either not eat or they'll just eat shit. And like you need to be giving back to your body and like warm things and Chinese medicine type things like herbal teas. And I did a lot of research into like the Chinese medicine way of things and, being able to give back in terms of blood and, warm soups and lentils and all that kind of stuff. So that was a really big focus. And I did that for 8 weeks. And then I went back onto another meal prep company because I am, someone that is very lazy when it comes to cooking food. So I'm not going to do that.
That's okay. That's okay.
I accept that as it is. And I get them made. And then when I don't get them made, I just make like very basic, like basic food because I'm not a chef. But I probably have gone back to tracking like 60% of the time in the last few months. But I don't have any specific goals right now in terms of losing weight or putting weight on. So like I'm happy just to chill here until, I do maybe decide to compete next year or, whatever it may be. But, it's taken me probably 10 years to get to this point where I feel really comfortable with this because I've done X amount of years of tracking and accurately doing that and monitoring my body. So, I think when I say that to people, a lot of Gen Pop people are like, oh, I can do that too. And they try intuitively eat and it doesn't work for them because
it does not.
So exactly. So like understand that it does take time to get to a point where you're really comfortable. And I still use tracking as a way to go, okay, so this is the right amount of food that I should be eating. And I know that quite well myself. So that's where I'm at. I'm just kind of chilling until I see the need to move into more of a specific phase. Yeah.
Such a good space to be in. Like I love obviously I don't have kids for our listeners, but like I like just like you, Emily, like from years of just tracking macros, doing the calories thing, there's a certain stage in life where you just need to sort of like, put the brakes on and be like, all right, let's test something out and do a little bit of the intuitive eating, more informed way to just give yourself a bit of a break. And I love the fact that you've done this during this journey postpartum. Like how long has it been now? Like 5, 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Yeah, like amazing. And it's so funny because going back to those clients who, had their babies and like 2 months later, they're like, I want to diet. It's just like, no, like you need to give your body some time to just readjust it. Like your body's still changing postpartum.
Yeah. I'm
pretty sure it takes up to a year for it to actually recover and then be able to reproduce again. Yeah. So I love the fact that yes, 60% of the time you're tracking, but then the other percentage you're going with the flow, you're enjoying life, you're having fun, you're not being so hard on yourself about what you're going to be doing next. And what a better way, like us coming into the festive season, you know.
Yeah.
Christmas can be so stressful for some people. I don't know.
I know. I understand, and I used to be for me too. So I feel that. But it was also because I was like I had that mindset of when you go into the festive season, you gain weight and you get fat. Like that was like the expectation, right? And that's what I feel like some people still have in their mind. They're like, I'm gonna end up in January, gonna be up 5 kilos. When it doesn't need to be like that. It's just about having some tools in your tool belt about how to manage this time. And I think going into a maintenance is exactly where people need to sit over Christmas. And then that gives them the opportunity to be like, okay, if I overdid it, you know, on the weekend, I'll just bring calories down a little bit this week. And like, obviously, like if people have like past eating disorders and things like that, we don't want to get them into that binge restrict cycle.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I think this is a really healthy way of looking at it. Instead of going, I overate one night, I've ruined all my progress. It's about going, I overate, sweet. You know what? I'm going to bring my calories down this week. And that's the mindset that we need to approach it. Not like, oh shit, I just undid all of my work over the year. And you know, what am I going to do next week kind of thing. So a lot of my girls, what I have them doing is, so maintenance calories across the week. And then if they have an event, they're banking for them. And then that's about it. Like,
let's talk a little bit more about banking. Like, what's your method around that?
Yeah, because there's so many different ways of looking at it. And I was doing a video the other day, and I'm like, oh, damn, it's so much. Like, I don't want another coach to look at this and be like, wrong. So I was like, there's so many ways of doing this. Like, every coach has their different way of doing it. So what I like to do, and it's different between me and Matt as well. He has different ways of looking at nutrition. But what works for me and my clients is that so if I have an event on Friday night and I have, 2,000 calories across the week, so that's 2,000 by 7. And then I want to go up to maybe 2,600 on Friday night because I know it's going to be a big day, like a big day of eating or drinking, and maybe just drinking, because sometimes like if you have a cocktail, they're like 600 calories sometimes. So it really depends on like what you're having. So I'm having a big, I'm maybe having 3 or 4 cocktails on Friday night with a meal. So that's probably going to be like a good 2,000 calories right there, right? Like, so I'm going to leave 2,600 for that day. I'm going to take off then 200 calories for 3 days leading up. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going to take off 200. So on those days, instead of having the 2,000, I'm going to have 1,800. And then all I do basically, because what I look at primarily is calories and protein. On those days that I'm down to 1,800, I'll meet my minimum protein, which is around like 120. And on the days that like I'm going out to eat, I'll still hit my minimum protein, which is 120. Like even if my protein's 140, I will take it down to like that 120 mark. And that's kind of what I want my girls to look at. Like people need to understand, like I have a lot of general population clients that are just mums wanting to get back into it, dads wanting to get back into it. So asking them to hit exact macros is too much, like for an athlete. It's for an athlete, totally understandable. For them, it's too much. For me, it's too much. So I look at always calories and min protein. So that's how I look at banking, as easy as that. And then if I got to Friday night and I overdid it and I went way too high, I would take a little bit off the next day and the next day. And that's how I'll recover that.
I love that. Doing that with moderation. And it's so cool to chat more about calories because, the old mindset used to be like us eating 1,200 calories a day. So, for you to like bank 1,200 calories to a Saturday night is just like, well, you're not going to be left with anything. You might as well shoot yourself in the leg.
Yeah.
So, again, like maintenance calories, for our listeners, it looks different to all of us. It looks different to me. It looks different to Emily, but the method around it is a really cool way. Like I like the method that you do. It's very similar to how I do it with my clients as well. It's just busting over a few days, and again, like banking it onto that big day event, whether it's like Christmas dinner, Christmas lunch, and just accepting that that's what it's going to be like for that week. And like you said, if you're going to overindulge, so be it. Like it's a few days out of the whole year.
Yeah. Like one day isn't going to make the difference. It's the it's consistently doing it. And that's why some people are like, I've gained weight overnight. I'm like, well, if you have it, you haven't, but like, did you have one big night? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, sweet, that's fine. Like, who cares? But it's like, did you have one big week? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, that's something that we need to look at in the grand scheme of things, because that's what's going to contribute to weight gain, not one huge night. Like, yes, it will put you up on the scales the next day because of water, sodium, whatever it may be, bloating. But like, we can't just like punish ourselves for one bad day, because one good day isn't going to make you lose 6 kilos, isn't it? So like, one bad day isn't going to make you gain 6 kilos either.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? A lot of people need to understand that weight gain doesn't necessarily equate to fat gain.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like you and I, we could go out and have like 3, 4 cocktails, and then the next day we'll weigh ourselves and we'll be like 1 or 2 kilos heavier. It's like, cool, no wonder, like all the food,
Yeah.
all the sugars,
Yeah.
you know, all the sodium, whatever it is, that's going to equate that water retention in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, and particularly during like, I think that's what a lot of people, women like beat themselves up as, right? Because we like have all this water retention naturally from like our cycle and heat and food types and sodium, but it doesn't always equate to weight gain. And so that's like, it's important not to look at the scales being up and being like, oh no, I'm, 1 kg fatter. Like, it's just a number on the scales. It's like, variables, so many other things happening around you at the moment.
Yeah, so true. Freaking love that. So, so cool. So hopefully our listeners have a better understanding that, coming into Christmas, whether, you're drinking or eating a little bit too much, just doing it with moderation, and maybe looking at that method that Emily spoke about regarding like the banking of
calories. Yeah.
Yeah. And even for listeners who are coaches, maybe that's something that you want to explore a little bit with your clients and see how that would work out for them by reducing their daily intake. So then when Christmas comes, they can just be like, happy as Larry, and trying to avoid those like posts, whether it's drink binges or eating binges. Yeah.
And like, that's the worst thing, I think, giving your clients the tools to be able to navigate this time without guilt is a huge thing. And that's what makes you a good coach, instead of being like, no, you have to eat your meal plan on that. I hate meal plans. But you have to have a meal plan on the day, or you're shit at this, or you're a shit athlete, or you're shit. Like, this is a mindset sometimes that I hear from athletes or competitors. It's like, if I can't do this, then I may as well not do it. I'm like, no, on days like Christmas and New Year's, you can have flexibility. Like, I understand if your comp's in 6 weeks time, maybe you can't have flexibility because you're not where you need to be. But if it's in 6 months time or 3 months time, give your client that opportunity to have flexibility, because that's going to be a huge mental win for them, instead of going behind your back, not eating what you said they would to eat, and then feeling shit. Because I've done that. I've been the competitor that my coach was like, no, you have to eat that meal plan on Christmas Day. And I was like, what do you mean? Like,
but it's Christmas.
What the hell? And I didn't. And then I felt bad about it. And I punished myself by cutting my calories the next day, and punished myself by doing 6 hours of cardio that week. So avoid that by giving your clients flexibility of that time. And like, banking your calories is a good idea. I think starting calories late on that day is a good idea, especially with new people. I wouldn't suggest everyone track on Christmas. I think that is sometimes even unrealistic for people. I'm not going to track on Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather practice intuitively eating on that day, and then give your coach feedback on how it went the next week, or whenever, like in the new year. They're like, hey, I did Christmas and I started my meals late. I drank heaps of water. Yeah, I had a few drinks, but like, I stayed within calories because I banked them. Did I do the right thing? And I'd be like, fuck yeah, you did. Like, you've used all the tools that I've given you. That's fantastic. Instead of being like, I didn't do anything that you said, and I just overate and I feel awful about myself. Like, that's what we don't want. We want people to be like, use the tools that we gave them.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that, because there's no point of putting any form of already like mental stress around that time of year, and them having to restrict that. But like you said, if you're an athlete, that's a totally different story. You have to have an open discussion with your coach and be like, what's feasible, what's realistic for you. But for us, every day now, for you to just have a glass of wine and enjoy yourself, and, have a piece of cake or whatever it is that you're wanting to have again,
Yeah.
moderation is key.
Patient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that. So good. You know what? Like, I feel as if you and I can literally have this chat for like hours ongoing. Seriously. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it can literally
Easy.
just go and flow. Like, I should just bring a cup of coffee, send one to you over there in Queensland, and like continue chatting. But I know your time is very valuable, and I do appreciate you so much for jumping on today. So, before we finish off, where could our listeners find you or find more about you?
Yeah, so I have my Instagram page, which is Emily_King Bodies, and then my website is just kingbodies.com.
Awesome. And finally, what are some big goals for you coming into 2022?
2022, I'm actually putting myself out there to do a triathlon next year, which
Hell
is
yes.
super strange and weird, but I'm going to do the Noosa Tri, which is at the end of next year. So I have 12 months to get myself into shape. There is a comp at the end of the year, like whether I do it or not, completely another thing. But like I've always been known to do things like, last minute, but I'm still working hard. I'm still training like 4 times a week. So we'll see. And then business wise, put another coach on, expand the business a little bit more, but I'm happy. I'm content with what we're doing.
Love that. So happy. It'll be cool because you mentioned before that you've started running postpartum and doing a little bit of weight. So it's cool. I reckon I could see you running and winning this triathlon. Just putting it out there.
I'll try.
Just putting it out there. Awesome. Girls, for our listeners, thank you so much for listening in. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure to tag myself at Sig Fisher and tag Emily_King Bodies, as well as the Women's Fitness Academy. Till next time, please, 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 please cherish this time of year. Moderation is key, as Emily said, and be kind to yourself, be compassionate, and, take it easy. If you want to have a untracking day, do so. Don't be restrictive and enjoy those little moments. Till next time, thank you, girls. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.